Morning, everybody. Now, this is week 3 of our series we're calling Unrest. God who sent his Son as the light of the world. He is the same God whom we serve. Well, we're talking in this message series in these weeks about the Christian and biblical response to unrest. We're facing so much unrest around us. And so what is our response? Well, thus far, 2 weeks ago, we talked about seeking wisdom, spiritual wisdom, godly wisdom that is more valuable than the stuff of this world, is more valuable than all of our anxieties and worries about the things of this world. And last week, we talked about the need to sacrifice, the calling to sacrifice. We're all going to sacrifice, whether we like it or not in life. And increasingly, even practicing our faith, we sacrifice. But we do so united with Jesus, who said, I did not come to this world to be served, but to serve, and to give my life. Jesus gives our life for us. Remember, I've been using a verse from the prophet Zechariah, kind of summing up this whole message about unrest. Not by our own might or by our own power, but by his Spirit. When we're worried about all the stuff in this world, the unrest going on, let's remember God has the whole world in his hands. His Spirit is what illuminates and unites us all. And St. Paul says to the Ephesians, strive for the unity of the Spirit. You see, the Spirit unites. However, we all know that in this fallen world that there are divisions. There are so many divisions. One thing that we can all agree on is that we're more divided than ever within our families, within society, within our community. Us against them. And even this disconnection that we experience with God. Well, I was thinking of many people suffering and lonely. My father is grieving, and my whole family is grieving the loss of my mother for this past summer. And my uncle, my dad's younger brother, has been up visiting with him a couple different times, spending time with my dad. And let me tell you, the two of them are the opposite ends of the political spectrum. So they'll be watching TV together, and one political ad will come on TV, and one of them will start yelling. And then another political ad will come, and the other one will start yelling. And then they'll start yelling at each other. But thanks be to God, they get along wonderfully, because 10 minutes later, they totally forgot what they were yelling about. So I think we all experience this kind of thing. And, surveys tell us that Catholics are evenly divided across that political spectrum, 50-50. And the thing is, sadly, I've also seen it said that many Catholics, if not most Catholics, are more emotionally invested at the level of the heart with their politics and with their opinions on that kind of stuff than they are emotionally invested with their faith and with the teachings of our Catholic faith. So that's a great challenge for us. And I'm not just talking about politics. You see, there are so many different groupings today that society kind of places us in that is about us versus them. So, for example, it could be white or black. It could be English or Spanish. It could be young or old. It could be city slicker or rural country person. It could be gay or straight, and it certainly could be giants or eagles. So there's so many different things like that. And, we're kind of in echo chambers sometimes in these discussions. We're in our tribe, and when you're talking with someone else, there can be fireworks. I think sometimes, at least for myself, if there's someone I disagree with, sometimes I'm just talking over them instead of conversing with them. Sometimes I'm not even looking at them, and that's an issue. And so just to let you know, FYI, this is going to be the first of 2 messages that's about the Christian response in overcoming divisions. What's the first step that we strive to overcome divisions? And this is up close and personal because it's between siblings. It's with parents. It's with adult children. It's with your coworkers, your classmates at school, your neighbors. What's our first response as followers of Christ? So we'll look at this wonderful episode in Mark's gospel today. And I invite you, as I go through this, to imagine yourself there in Jericho. And particularly focus on the character of Jesus and of the blind man. So the story begins like this. Mark tells us, as Jesus was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a sizable crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind man, the son of Timaeus, sat by the roadside begging. So Jesus and his disciples at this point intend just to pass through the city of Jericho. It's an ancient city, and it's only about 15 miles from Jerusalem. Jerusalem, of course, is Jesus' final destination. And at this point, Jesus is immensely popular. His fame has spread far and wide, and he has many followers who've heard of his miracle working, his teaching, his preaching, and he's just passing through the town. And we're introduced to this character of Bartimaeus. We don't know much about him except he must have had a very, very hard life. At this point, because of his blindness, he's reduced to begging. And at that time, many of the beggars would have hung out at the city gate because that's where everybody came in or out of the city. So Bartimaeus hears in the hustle and bustle of the crowd the name Jesus of Nazareth, and Jesus' reputation had preceded him. So he takes the opportunity, and Bartimaeus cries out in a loud voice. He says, "Jesus, son of David, have pity on me." And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he kept calling out all the more, "Son of David, have pity on me." And so Bartimaeus is desperate, and he's persistent in crying out. But in this big crowd, there are other people who are telling him just to be quiet, shut up. Just trying to put him down. But Bartimaeus doesn't give up. He must have a really booming voice because he gets Jesus' attention. But Mark then tells us in the next verse, Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take courage, get up. Jesus is calling you." He threw aside his cloak, sprang up, and came to Jesus. And so as much as there were some in the crowd who were telling Bartimaeus, "Be quiet," there were others who helped him. There were others who encouraged him. They said, "Jesus is calling you. Have courage, stand up." Now think about it from Bartimaeus' perspective. Place yourself in his shoes. This is absolutely the most important moment in his life. He has a choice whether to just stay over on the side and the margins or to stand up. And so he steps up, he jumps up, he throws off his cloak, and he meets Jesus face to face, person to person, heart to heart. And Jesus asks him a question that he asks us all. Jesus says, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man replied to him, "Master, I want to see." Jesus told him, "Go your way. Your faith has saved you." Immediately he received his sight and followed him on the way. What do you want me to do for you? Think about it. Jesus knew what the guy wanted. He was blind. But he wanted Bartimaeus to speak up. He wanted him to ask, at least in this particular situation. And that's how God is with us sometimes. He simply wants us to ask, and ask specifically, what do you want me to do for you? And for Bartimaeus, it's about having that courage to spring up, to throw off his cloak. Well, what is it in our life that we have to toss aside in order to encounter Jesus? And he meets him. He receives renewed vision, that he can now follow him as a disciple. And so here, my friends, is what I think is the first step to overcoming divisions and polarization in our life. It's simply sight, to see. Not just physical sight, but spiritual sight. To first of all, see God. And whatever blindness we have, to have removed, that we can encounter Jesus Christ, person to person, heart to heart, face to face. And sometimes it's about seeing God more clearly the way he is and not the way we think God is. So just think about it. Jesus repeatedly crossed over boundaries and taboos and religious rules that were about clean and unclean. So for example, here he saw Bartimaeus, he heard him cry out, and he healed him, the blind man. But he did that time and time and time again with lepers. Lepers who were considered religiously separated because they were unclean. He crossed over to touch them and heal them. Jesus crossed boundaries, for example, to eat with sinners, like prostitutes, tax collectors. One story I love is that of the guy Zacchaeus, who is literally hard to see because Zacchaeus was short in stature. And so what does Zacchaeus do? He climbs up the tree so Jesus sees him, and then he says, "Today I will eat with you." And he welcomes him. You see, if we truly see God, that's who he is, and revealed in Christ, his heart. So tomorrow, I have an eye doctor appointment. Really, honestly, I do. And I'm afraid that the eye doctor is going to prescribe me with reading glasses because, guess what? I'm getting old. And I was thinking about this. Prayer is kind of like going to the eye doctor because persistent prayer over time upgrades our spiritual eyeglass prescription. Prayer over time, that habit of prayer, helps us immensely to focus our sight, to focus our vision, to see God in our life. And there's more, because when we have a habit of prayer, it's not just seeing God heart to heart, face to face, but it's also seeing ourselves as God sees us and seeing others. You know, sometimes our vision is so obscured about the way we see ourselves or see others. Prayer makes us more and more Christ-like, to put on God's eyeglasses and just simply to have that vision, to see the other, whoever that might be, the way God sees them. Well, my friends, today our parish is kicking off a 40-day prayer campaign. And it's very simple. How to participate, there's a sheet in the bulletin with the daily prayers, at least for the first 2 weeks. They'll be posted on our Facebook page. You can get them by text or email. You can get them in the Adoration Chapel right here if you come in here to pray, or your small group leader, and those of you in small groups will receive these prayers. There's many ways to participate. You see, united in prayer as a family of the parish, and just united in prayer with one another, we receive a renewed vision. And I just ask you today and in this week to pray for 2 particular graces for yourself, and I will for myself as well. The first thing, just simply ask God for the grace to remove your blindness. In what way in your life are you contributing to divisions? In what way are you contributing to polarization between you and the other person? It could be that attitude that I have to win the argument, or that I have to always be right. It could be the news or the social media that you consume. It could just be your circle of friends. In what way do I need to ask God forgiveness that I may see? And then the second thing to pray for, it's very, very simple. Just the grace to notice and to see those other people. You know, Bartimaeus was a beggar. Nobody would have normally noticed him. Who are those people in our life that we don't notice? The first step is simply to not overlook, but to look and notice and see them. And so those things, just pray about that this week, especially as you go about in your school or your business or your work or your commute or even in your household. So my friends, bottom line, we believe that our peace and our well-being in life don't come from anything exterior that's outside of our control, from the news, from the past, from any other person, in fact. Our peace and our well-being come from a friendship with Christ. And so like Bartimaeus, may we have the courage to throw off our cloaks, so to speak, to encounter him face to face, heart to heart. And then, like Christ, may we be more and more with the vision to see and find ways to cross that divide. Amen.